Live
Doing
right
it
now?
live.
We're live right now.
We are live right now.
Yes.
Okay. Well, hello. Good afternoon, everybody. This is Jonathan Harmon of the J. Harmon Home Team, powered by Keller Williams with the Table Talk podcast, where there is always room at the table. And I've got my friend Brad Hopkins with us. Hey, Brad.
Hey, man. How you doing?
Fantastic. How are you?
Oh, really good.
Yep. He's even wearing his little exit pin there.
Yeah,
that's right.
Exit Realty. So
on brand.
that's right. We like all kinds of folks on here, even really ugly realtors.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. If you,
Averagist. We're supposed to be
Averagist, that's right.
averagist.
if you saw the Facebook exchange, then you understand. I'm not really insulting him.
I started it.
him, but he started it. Yeah. But anyway, so Brad beat me out a couple years ago for Realtor of the Year in the MTAR. What do you call it? Organization, I guess.
Yep.
And if I was going to get beat by anybody, I'm glad it was you, man.
Well, I appreciate that. It just goes to prove that luck over skill generally wins out.
Yeah,
so.
and it's definitely not good looks. As we've
Neither
been
one
talking
of us would
about.
have won, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
But anyway, so Brad, how long have you been a real estate agent?
So last year was the end of my first full third year. So I didn't really word that right, but 3 years basically.
Okay.
3 years and 4 months to be precise.
You're working on year 4 right now.
Right.
Is what it
Correct.
amounts to. Okay. So got in right before the market went completely haywire. It was starting.
Yeah, it was still pretty hot when I
Yeah.
started. I think my very first listing I got, had 27 showings, and so it was still hot then, even in 2018. So
Yeah, but the big thing, and we're going to dive into some of this here in just a sec. But the big thing that we want to talk about today is, to be honest with you, 2 years ago I was saying was kind of a created hype inventory crisis, and we did have a little bit of an inventory crisis, but not anything like what we have right now. And then just kind of the market appreciation. I want to kind of get some of your insight on that. And the people that watch this, they hear me say the same things over and over. So I'd love to hear your take on it and see if we match up. But I do have to do some business first, just real quick before I forget. Mr. Bryan Nale over at IBERIABANK Mortgage. One just fine human being, and back to our previous joke.
Yeah, the averagest,
the averagest looking loan officer in Rutherford County. But he's my go-to guy. So if you need anything, a refi or mortgage or whatever, definitely give Bryan a call with IBERIABANK. So thank you, Bryan, for underwriting this show and for supporting Spread the Positive. Trent, you got anything you want to add to that?
Thank you, Bryan. Good to see you, Brad. Appreciate you being here.
Yeah.
This is going to be a good one.
Happy to be here, and I'll also vouch for Bryan. I use him as well. I've got 2 young couples using him currently, so
That's awesome.
He's a great guy.
Bryan's the man.
Perfectly timed.
Big fan of Mr. Nale. So Brad, what if somebody comes up to you and I'm sure you're like me, you get this question all the time. If they know that you're a real estate agent, the number one question they ask you is, so how is the market? Right? They'll say that, or they'll say, oh, you must be loving this market, some version of that.
Right.
How do you feel that question right now?
Well, I just say it's busy. It's it's a fight, but it's manageable. I honestly try to downplay it a little bit compared to what it is. You called it a manufactured or a hyped housing crisis
3 years ago.
3 years ago.
Yes.
But I still think that, I do think it's real, but I think we're kind of our own worst enemy in this thing. I think we talk about it so much. What's the number one reason you get when somebody says, hey, I really want to sell my house, but
I'm afraid of what I might be able to buy?
And if everybody that was afraid to buy put their house on the market, we wouldn't have a housing shortage. And I think we do that, like as realtors. I think we, instead of when we kind of do our humble brag and try to generate business, we do it in I just got so much extra money for my client and we had 47 offers. Well, that's great for that one person, but 46 other people left that going, man, this market sucks.
Yeah.
And I think,
and that might have been the third, fourth. We had one last year 11 times.
Right. And so I think if we changed our mindset, because I know when I feel that way, if I have a house that I got 50 grand over asking for, I feel like I swung and missed. Personally, I feel like I should have priced that house higher. They wouldn't have had to leave their house for 40 showings of people that could never have bought that house.
Mm.
You know, I mean, that's my mindset, right? Like if I want my person to get the most money that they can with the least amount of difficulty and least amount of headache. So if somebody comes to look at this $500,000 house that's really a $600,000 house, they were never buying it in the first place. But that's another offer they've got to look at because they think they're looking at a $500,000 house. You know, and so
that's interesting. But do you think though, and I experienced this probably right about the time you were getting in about 4 years ago. Do you think that people are so conditioned now that let's say that it's you listed at 500 and it shows 47 times, you get 22 offers on it, and one of them escalates it up to 570.
Right.
Okay. Couple of questions here. Is it really a $570,000 house? That's question number one, right? And if you had listed it at 570, would you have had the same number of showings? Because if somebody's really willing to go to 570 on it, are they conditioned up here to think that they have to start at 550? So in other words, or 500. So in other words, if it had been listed at 570, they know that it's going to go over asking price. It's not really a 620 house.
Oh yeah, I think there's a sweet spot for sure. I mean, I don't think you can, you know, I think you've got to come in a little bit under of what you think. I just think we've got to be more cautious of how much under we're going.
Sure.
Because I just think we're creating that environment, and it's great for us as selling agents to be like, look what I did. Yay me. But I think it creates an environment that's just for the industry as a whole isn't great. When we're, you know, I agree that, you know, always I've been of the mindset I want to price it a little bit below and drive traffic. But I think we all know now we're in an environment where, you know, we've got to be really paying attention to what the market's going to and not where the market's at. And you know, narrow that down a little bit for buyers and sellers to where.
Well, and I think that it's become such a part of our market at this point that the people that humble brag, or maybe not even all that humble, you know, that they got X number of dollars above asking price. You know, my question is starting to be, well, so what?
Right.
You know,
and what did you do to get, you know, like,
yeah. And, you know, and so I'm starting to look at, as a listing agent, anybody can stick a picture of a house on the MLS and get 50 showings.
Mm-hmm.
That's easy, right? And they can also get whatever, you know, above asking price because either they listed it too low or maybe they listed it right, and, you know, whatever.
Sometimes things happen. I get it, you know.
But so what are the things that you think really differentiate a quality selling listing agent in this market? Because I don't think it's those two things. And I don't think getting a house under contract in 24 hours does it either. In fact, I purposely hold them for, you know, a good 72 hours just to get people to commit to it.
Right.
You know, so they're not having buyer's remorse when they submitted an offer 3 hours after it was listed.
Yeah. I mean, you know, I don't know that I see things that I like that other people do, but I don't know that, you know, that there's any one thing that you can point to. You know, personally, I just think it's about getting it out there at the right price and getting it in front of as many people as you can through marketing and those sorts of things. But, I don't know that anybody's having to go too far extra. I say that I see a lot of bad listings out there. So,
sure.
You know, where I'm like, oh my gosh, how did we get to this point? But
well, I guess that's my point. Like, what, as a listing agent, how do you know you're giving great service?
Well, I mean, I know I'm giving great service by how it looks when, you know, the conversations that I have and how we get the place to look, you know, the things that we offer extra, whether it's staging or house cleaning service. You know, we do different things depending on what the client's needs are. But just knowing that I've got that house ready to show in the best possible condition that it can be. You know, not everything's going to show at a 10, but knowing that I've got this where it couldn't show any better,
right?
Whether it's bringing in a landscaper to do the landscaping for them because they've kind of let that go, or whether it's, you know, having a maid come in and having, you know, some cleanup done. But regardless of what it is, we get them to the point where it's the best it can possibly show.
Well, and I think I think you gave me the answer that I would agree with as well. And that is, you know, a real estate agent doesn't really do anything that a person couldn't do for themselves. And this is, I had this epiphany several years ago when for sale by owners have always been part of the market, right? But when the market started getting really easier for sellers, i.e. buyers were getting more desperate, it became easier to stick a sign in your yard and accidentally get an offer, right? I mean, that's not hard to do right now. So then I had to really look kind of deep down in my soul and say, okay, well then why should somebody pay me to help them? And I think you just did it. You know what to do. You know when to do it. You know the people to get it done, right? You make their lives easier.
Right. And to keep it together through all the process after the fact, you know, I mean, getting a contract is just kind of step one. So, you know, I feel like there's a lot of work after the sale, quote unquote, that still has to happen, whether it's through negotiation or just steering through the process. And, you know, I feel like we do offer a pretty, you know, I think we help people out and protect them from a lot of the bad things that are out there that could happen to them on their own. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And, you know, it's an interesting market. One thing that I've experienced, I want to get your thoughts on this. You know, there's a lot of talk about how mentally taxing it is on a buyer right now. You know, they might write 3 or 4 or 5 or, like I said, 11 offers was our record last year, and not get the house, right? So at some point they just kind of say, I just need a house, right? And that's exhausting, right? And it's not the experience that when they were 15 years old and they were first starting to think about buying their first house, you know, that they dreamed. It's not that, you know. But I think there's also some mental taxation on sellers right now that we don't really talk too much about. I think that because the market does move so quickly and because the market does, we do see prices going, like you list it here and it ends up selling up here. I think that a lot of sellers are going, man, am I selling at the wrong time? Right? Am I taking an offer that I could have done better on? Right. So there's a whole lot of almost seller's remorse. What do you think about that?
Oh, I think there's definitely some of that. You know, I fall into that category somewhat. You know, and I think it really depends a lot on what their plan is after too. You know, I think that they don't, you know, if they're selling and buying, which is what happened to me, I look at what my old house sold for and I'm like, oh man, I would get so much more for that right now. But then I look at what my current one's worth. I'm like, oh, I'm
pay way more.
I would be paying more for that, you know, and that's so I, you know, I think it really depends on what your plan was. I think if you sold your house thinking you were going to rent for a while and wait the market out and buy cheap, then yeah, you've had some serious remorse.
You messed up.
But I hope that nobody got that advice either, because I haven't read or seen anything in the last 3 years that said, oh yeah, the slowdown's coming. You know, I mean, I do, but I feel like they're outliers, you know, and I feel like they're kind of, you know, I feel like they're pretty counterbalanced and
some Chicken Littles out there.
Yeah, you know, I mean, I remember during COVID, we were reading about the foreclosure crisis that was going to come, and it's like all these people in forbearance, and I kept thinking to myself, how do you let yourself get into a foreclosure because you can sell your house in a day? Like, you know, like what? That's not a market that lends itself to foreclosure.
Well, not only that, but that whole forbearance thing. I remember thinking, I get what they're saying, right? If a typical traditional forbearance was going to be used, but what they were doing is they were just moving those delinquent months to the back end of the loan. And can you imagine being the first financial institution to start calling all those loans into foreclosure through a pandemic?
Yeah,
not going to happen. The PR would be atrocious on that.
Well, and you know, I did hear stories of people that did take a traditional forbearance or whatever, but I mean, but I'm just trying to imagine a worst case scenario where, okay, you went into forbearance and you now owe $10,000 and the bill's due. You can still you've still gained 30% appreciation in the last 2 years.
Right.
So you're still going to be able to get out of that. I mean, there may be a few that, you know, maybe bought on a 97 or 100% loan and then immediately went into forbearance,
or they trashed their house or something,
But sure. I mean, those are going to be so few and far between that, you know, they're just not going to be I never thought in reading those articles that's going to come true. Right. You know, like no part of me said, oh, that's coming.
Well, and I spoke to a guy, it's a long story, but anyway, he's out in South Carolina, and, you know, he was kind of asking some questions. Like, he was in a situation, lost his job, you know, kind of the typical chain of events that leads to a traditional foreclosure. And I said, man, you need to get an agent that's right there with you. I said, I'll be happy to look one up and help you with that. But you need to do that like right now. And he had basically just kind of turned a blind eye for like 6 months. And I'm like, you got to face this. He goes, but I don't want to lose my house. There's this guy out in Oklahoma or something that'll loan me the the money to pay off the thing. And and I was like, well, what's the interest rate on it? It was like 25%.
Oh, geez.
I said, man, you can't borrow your way out of debt. You can't do it.
Mm-mm.
And I don't, he never really did contact me back. He had even asked about reverse mortgages and all this other stuff. And I said, buddy, sell the house, take the money, stick it in your pocket, go breathe for a year, pay an entire year's worth of rent
right out of your proceeds,
and just sit, recover, get your job back to, get all that stuff back together, and then come back and fight another day.
Mm-hmm.
But
you don't know whether or not he did that.
Based on the conversation I had with him, I am certain that he did not.
But that's going to be a very, very, very rare exception.
Yeah.
Like there's just not. I just don't see a marketplace for that. Anytime soon. As far as so, like I said, it's just there have been a few. The sky's going to fall, but I don't see it as long as people are. I just left the chamber. As long as people are moving to Tennessee, and they are. Then they got to live somewhere.
Yeah, we were number 1 in 2020 on the U-Haul study, and number 3 last year in 2021. And who knows where we'll be this year. So pulled the numbers. 2021, Rutherford County in aggregate appreciated 31% in 1 year. How long can we sustain that?
Now, I do think we'll level. I think that's probably coming. Depending on where the interest rates settle. I've seen everywhere from 4 to 6.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody at a sales meeting today said somebody had told them 9, and I'm like,
not possible,
not happening. But I think that will slow. From what I see, I do feel like we've got a pretty good wave of new construction that's going to start finishing. And then that's going to create kind of a little bit of a wave of people that sell what they had to get into the new.
Mm-hmm.
So I do think as we see some more of this new construction coming to completion, that hopefully we'll see. I know right now I have 3 buyers under contract for new construction that have been since last year, and they have houses to sell, but we're just in that
right.
waiting game.
The log jam.
And I think once that comes, I think you'll see a little bit of that pressure released, and you won't have the person that says, I just got to get a house, and they're, shooting the moon finally on their 10th try. They're like, whatever it takes,
Right.
So I
saw a meme one time. I think it was last week. It said
the blank offer.
Yeah, the blank contract. My buyers are tired of filling out these. Just put whatever you want in.
Yeah, they'll pay it. Yeah. I mean, I think the days of that at some point, I think personally, and I'm not an expert, I'm no Edsel Charles or whatever, but
right.
I think by the, late summer, I think we're going to see a lot of this new construction kind of relieve a little bit of the pressure.
Well, that being said, I also saw a report where we're 71% less inventory available right now than we were this time last year.
Right.
So, I think we're going to have to see a whole lot of new construction. Historically, and if you look back, the number of resale homes year to year stays pretty close to the same.
Mm-hmm.
Even last year, it stayed pretty close to what it was the year before and pretty close to the year before that. I mean, within, less than 10% variation there. The big difference is new construction. It's always the stopgap.
Mm-hmm.
And when we ran into not just labor issues, but we ran into material issues and, spiking prices and just it was wild, right? When that happened, then all of a sudden that stopgap dried up.
Right. Well, and also too, I wonder how much, sometimes I think we get a little bit caught up in small snapshots of, when somebody says we're at 71% less inventory than we were this time last year, like what was the subset that they were looking at? Because I think we've changed dramatically the way we're listing houses.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know that if you have a habit of looking at the Monday or Friday or whatever and compare it to the year before, I know for me personally, and just about everybody I know, we've shifted to, hey, the house is going on the market on Friday. It's going to be off by Monday.
Yeah.
So if you're checking inventory on a Tuesday, and that's your historical, if that's your starting point, well,
sure.
you're checking it in the valley. So because when I look
that's
at
interesting,
when you look at the total numbers pending and the total number under contract, January was a little bit. There were less houses closed in January. I think it was like 200 less houses closed in January,
mm-hmm.
but nowhere near like 71%. And
mm-hmm.
so, and you actually look at pendings, we were actually 200 up in pendings versus.
But yet new listings were down. That's what they were talking about, was specifically new listings.
Well, and see, I think some of that has to do with the way we track it, because again, we've changed the way we sell houses. How many new constructions are hitting new listings? They're holding them.
They're holding them until
they're under contract.
They don't know the price. And a lot of times.
Right. And I think not only is that holding true, I think some resales are doing that too, where, we're writing letters and we're saying, hey, we'd like to buy your house. And they say, sure. And so that never hits an active listing.
Right.
So you're still seeing the transactions happen. They're just happening in a different way. So
that's interesting. That's a good point. Yeah. So I guess the better thing to do would be to compare. But even if you compare solds, you really have to pull the tax record in addition to the
because they may
MLS.
never hit the MLS.
Yeah.
So
all right. So I'm a new buyer. I'm a first time buyer. I just turned 26. I got my first real job, and I've got $10,000 in the bank because I've been saving really hard. And Brad, I've got a great job. I've been there for a year. I'm making pretty good money. I want to buy a house in Rutherford County.
I mean, it's going to be possible, but it's going to be a fight. We're going to have to, get a little creative. And honestly, I'd probably try to steer them toward new construction. That's your best bet, where you can, not have to bring a ton of cash, not have to waive appraisals,
right.
that sort of thing. It's going to be the most comfortable buying experience for you.
Yeah.
If you don't want to go that route, then, you've just got to lay out all the pitfalls of what they're going to be up against. Probably have to get them a little realistic at looking, this is what you can afford, but this is what we need to look at so that you can afford to put all your cash toward waiving the appraisal or whatever, so that, it's a challenge. There's no doubt about it. But, that's what I honestly would do, though. It's like, let's talk new construction.
Where does new construction start price-wise in Rutherford County right now?
Gosh, I don't know the exact number. There's very few that are
just in general.
Just
like if I'm asking you that.
Oh, okay. Well, I would say at a starting point, we can find some that's in the low threes. There's some that advertise in the twos, but they're going to be so bare bones, or townhouses. And if you want a townhouse, we can find it. But I would expect to start out in the threes.
Okay. I have a family of 4. Where am I going to start out price wise? I want an office and a 2-car garage.
About $550.
It's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah. It's crazy, but that's what we're, that's where we are. But, if we've kind of lagged behind other areas in the country, and from that standpoint too.
That's
so
true.
There's some people that still look at our prices and go, really?
Yeah.
That's exciting. Let's go.
That's a bargain. Yeah. I had that conversation with someone not too long ago about the pricing index, was it CPI or whatever, and specifically the housing portion of that. It was only like 2 years ago that we finally crossed. Maybe it's 3 years ago now that we crossed the 1.0 mark. So 1.0 is the national average,
right?
And it was like literally less than 5 years ago. I think it was 3 years ago. We were still in the 0.9 something. And then we finally crossed that 1.0, and we're sitting at about a 1.13,
which is crazy when you think about what a boom town this area is.
Yeah, 13% above average, and that's it.
Right.
In comparison, you've got certain parts of California, which everybody's like, oh, all these people from California, they're moving from all over the place right here. But certain parts of that, they're at like 3.5s on some of the CPIs.
Right. And they're still in a housing shortage too. It's funny. Everybody's like, oh, they're just flocking out of there. And I'm like, well, their shortage doesn't show it because they're just as short as we are.
Yeah.
There's only, I think I looked at it at the end of last year. There were only 3 states in the country that were having what they called negative pricing, which wasn't even negative pricing, but below. And it was Louisiana, Mississippi, and I want to say North Dakota, I believe, were the 3.
So you can buy cheap there.
Right. Yeah. So if you want to move to Mississippi or Louisiana
or North Dakota,
bring a snow shovel. Yeah, absolutely. So, it's a pretty universal thing that, it's cheap money. You can borrow cheaper, even with interest rates climbing, they're still cheaper than when I bought my first house.
Yeah, for sure.
A fraction of when our parents probably bought their first house.
Yeah. Oh, no doubt about that. So why is that? Why do we have such a boom right now? Because you hear it's interesting to me. We have such conflicting information out there, right? Nobody has a job right now. Like you hear that nobody wants to work. We can't get anybody to work. So where's all the workers gone? All of a sudden, did we just double the amount of jobs that were out there? Cut the workforce in half. But if that's the case, then how are they buying houses also?
Yeah.
If nobody's working, why do we have more demand for housing? That doesn't make sense to me.
My honest opinion is that we're behind. I think our counting metrics of who's working and who's not is behind the 8 ball of the gig economy. Like, I don't think they have a good grasp on, just how many people took this time to reevaluate and, are now part of the gig economy, which, changes because they're not a traditional, what's the term? There's an acronym for it where it's like of age in workforce, but so they're not technically in the workforce, but they're, making, great money freelancing or driving it. I always use the story. I have a client right now that he worked for a corporate restaurant as a general manager, quit his job, and is making $7,000 a month driving Uber.
That's crazy.
And he doesn't have a VP breathing down his neck. He doesn't have to deal with,
if he doesn't want to work today, he just doesn't work today.
He doesn't have to deal with employees. He can set his own schedule, and I just think that there's a significant number of people that have done that, and that we don't have a good grasp on that. I think that's a big part of it. Because, I feel like the social media buzz of it all was, well, everybody's just getting this free money and nobody's working, but
right.
Free money's been gone for a while for the most part. Like that. If you lived off that for this long, you're definitely not in the housing market. Yeah, I don't know how you're living.
You're very frugal,
right?
Or you're growing your own. Or
I don't know, but that's so I just don't feel like it's that. I feel like people are working. They're just working in different ways, So, I'm not even sure how you and I count in that workforce.
Well, the last round of free money, it was the first time that we were ever allowed to even apply for that,
right?
In unemployment. And it, I did not attempt to do that.
This is where I'll pitch your need to donate to RPAC. There's some serious reasons why we were able to do a lot of the things we did. And so, it was a big deal that we were able to do that, from being considered essential employees all the way to, PPP money. I don't know if you partook in that, but they did a lot for us in this last year.
Sure.
So, but I don't know how we count them. I honestly don't. I should actually research that. That's a good question. Like, do we count as employed people?
I bet it has to do with how often how long we have been reporting as self-employed.
I would imagine, but every time I watch the news, they say that those numbers come from payroll. Like, those are payroll processed numbers. So
then that wouldn't.
Right. So that's what I'm saying. So how many people out there, even if you're not going to like an Uber, how many people just figured out a way now that we're from home? I don't work doing XYZ for this marketing company, but now I'm a freelancer.
Yeah.
And I'm now designing websites for people individually and that sort of thing. So I think our economy's just shifted in a lot of ways, and I just don't think we have a grasp on the head count.
I think you're probably right. That's a good point.
Because if that were the case, either unemployment would be way higher from people trying to get the money, or we would see a lot more people without.
Yeah, exactly. And instead, we're seeing a spike in demand to go along with the.
Well, it's not just real estate; it's automobiles and boats.
Right?
Like the wait for a camper in 2021 was like 12 weeks.
Right.
Like it wasn't just. It's not just real estate. Like the disposable income was out there. So.
All right, so shift gears a little bit. Coolest house you ever listed?
Oh gosh, I don't know. Probably one of the coolest ones I ever listed was one of the cheapest ones. It was this little old 2-bedroom, turn of the century. Well, not even turn of the century. Like, it was built in like 1898, so turn of 2 centuries ago, right? Yeah. But it had, it had all the like the hidden quarters upstairs and the all the things that cellars and just almost kind of creepy, but almost kind of cool, you know?
Yeah.
So
it can be both.
Yeah. So that was probably the coolest one I had.
Yeah. And most houses you ever showed one buyer?
Oh Gosh, in a day.
Right.
I don't know that I have a good metric on that. I'd say maybe 15. I've been
Ever?
pretty lucky.
Oh,
yeah.
when you got started. So I got started in 2009, and the most I showed a buyer, I kept them 154 houses.
Oh yeah, I haven't
over
done
the
that.
course of 6 months. Because there was inventory. We looked at everything,
right?
Like everything. All right, biggest regret so far in real estate.
It's funny. I just commented this on Facebook the other day. I think the biggest regret I have is over the last 2 years, not pushing people harder because I didn't want to seem pushy. I didn't want to seem commission hungry when I realistically thought we were making offers that they were going to miss on. But I was like, okay, it's your money. I'm not going to spend it for you. But I wish I would have, because I use the example. I've got a young couple right now that this time last year we were shopping in the Nations. We missed out on a couple of houses that were 450, 475.
And they're 650 now.
They re-signed their lease. They're now back in the market, and now we just missed out on 2 that were 650. Like our offer was.
I saw your post,
and I was like, if I had just pushed them and been, because I felt it, like in my heart of heart, I'm like, yeah, they should just dig a little deeper. But it was so hard for me to, and they're a young couple, and be like, just go spend this extra 25 grand. Like it's real easy for me to spend their 25 grand.
Sure.
But had I done that,
hindsight now, they more than have made that.
Oh man, they would love me. Like I would be their favorite person in the world, because I've put 150 extra. If they'd have bought that house for $5 and it's worth $650 now, then I would have put that extra money in their pocket. So
yeah, my biggest regret is when I got in 2009 that I didn't go borrow $1 million and buy everything I could in Laverne.
Yeah,
seriously, that's my biggest regret.
Right.
I mean, houses were selling for $50 a square foot.
Yeah,
and less sometimes.
It's funny. Jeremy in our office, who owns a pretty significant chunk of rental properties, he's always kind of lamenting the ones that he sold.
Yeah.
But he's like, well, I made good money on it at the time, but yeah, I always he's like, that's always my regret, is the ones I let go of. He's like, I've never regretted anything I've bought.
Right.
So
yeah,
and I think that will probably be my story to people that are in that same situation. Is I don't know too many people that are like, boy, I really missed out by buying this one.
Right.
Like so.
I know a couple of those stories, which I won't name names, but anyway,
but they're
they're very few.
Yeah, they're the exception, not the rule,
for sure. So, and especially if you're in the flip industry, that comes a little bit more to fruition,
right?
Than if you're holding it for any period of time, really.
Right.
All right. Big plans for 2022. What's your goals this year?
My goal is just to actually, I was in the camp of people that was a little bit down in 2021. I'm not sure exactly, I am pretty sure exactly why, but, a good bit of my funnel pushed off for new construction. That's a couple of million there. And then, I built so much of my business off social. I really think that I just didn't do a good enough job of building my funnel up in the downtime. So now it's already picked back up. That's why I'm already busier now than I was through all of last year, kind of. So it's just to kind of double up on what I did last year is my goal.
Okay, well, very good. And I know there's some folks that watch occasionally that are just now getting started in real estate, or maybe they're considering getting into the business. What advice? Give me 2 nuggets. One for the people that just got started, and one for the people that are thinking about getting in. You've had a lot of success quick. So
and that's in the eye of the beholder, I guess. I don't know. I don't feel like
you
it.
You beat me for Realtor of the Year. I mean, come on.
Well, yeah, that's a different set of category, or that's not exactly real estate success as much as it is being involved in doing things. But I think the biggest thing is to really hone in on your sphere, your list, your database. Like, if you're just getting in the business, make sure that you've got that Christmas card list that you can transfer over and just talk to people. That's the biggest thing, is to start talking, have that list of people, and get a system about it, and don't just kind of laissez-faire your way through it and be like, hey, I'm a realtor, like actually make the phone calls, send out the letters, do the things that they tell you to do.
Right.
Because there's a reason why, it works. That's we've got an intruder.
Yeah. Production assistant Cammie over there is guarding the door. So, yeah.
But yeah, there's I went through that ninja training when I first started, and they've their whole slogan is the system works if you work the system. So, find you a system and make that happen. What's your advice? You've got the big experience here.
I actually very much agree with what you're saying. And, you got to tell people you can't be a secret agent. And especially if you re-careered from something else, you got to shift people's mind from, Jonathan was a school teacher to now Jonathan's a real estate agent. There is no substitution for handshaking. There's not a substitute for that.
That needs to be another show for you. I'm amazed. I feel like teachers turn into some of the best realtors. It's a pretty amazing process to watch. But
teachers and nurses,
they have really, I guess teachers have a really great sphere to start with, but I'm always blown away at the amount of teachers that I find that do this and do it well.
I think it's innate communication. I think that's what it is being able to communicate an idea that they may or may not understand, the recipient may or may not understand, break it down into little chunks, and then re-explain if necessary.
Right.
Or what's the word in teaching? It's not re-explain, it's remediate. Remediate. Yeah. So, all right, man. Any cool listings you got coming up?
No, not right yet. I've got one coming up in Tuscany here shortly, and then I've got a little townhouse coming, and then hopefully I'll have one potentially in Valley View, depending on how the shopping goes.
Yeah,
which is that's the big thing.
Valley View is a nice neighborhood.
It is. It's going to be interesting to see how the new zoning affects it. I'm curious to see if we don't see quite a few go on the market in a lot of those neighborhoods out through there. A lot of pretty popular neighborhoods just got rezoned. So I'm interested to see if it has an effect at all. But
sure.
I have talked to some parents that are like, I don't know if I can get a waiver. I'm going to, because the waiver is only good for certain years.
Kid, well, it's only good for the kid that's actually in the school,
right?
Not the sibling or whatever
right
that's behind them.
And so, I think there's some people that are going to have to look at, whether or not they're going to change or what they're going to do. So
yeah,
it's pretty interesting, all the things that can affect the decision.
No doubt. All right, my friend. Well, I appreciate you. Appreciate you, what you do. I appreciate talking to another professional. We had Robin C on here not too long ago, and she's awesome. So,
when
I redid the podcast, I said I want to make sure I rotate some other agents that are doing the right things out there in here and just pick their brains and learn a little bit. And,
yeah, no, I'm happy to do it. I enjoy it.
I appreciate you, man. Appreciate all you do. Hey, if you have anything real estate related that you have questions about and you don't want to talk to me, give this guy a call. Or if you do want to talk to me, give me a call. That'd be great too. And don't forget about Bryan Nale supporting Spread the Positive and helping us out with this.
The averagest looking lender.
That's right. Mr. Average out there.
Is the sponsor of the Ugly Realtor Show.
There you go. I love it. There could be some legs to that.
Like I feel like it could be a thing. We should just do the Ugly Realtor Show once a month.
Definitely work.
So,
Trent, jot that one down, man.
It's on the list.
We may need to do that. And then, of course, Spread the Positive always needs your help. If you are a business owner out there and you would like to support Spread the Positive, or if you're an individual and you'd like to support the mission of Spread the Positive, which is bringing light to what's going right, Trent would love to talk to you. And we've got something cool coming up, don't we, Trent?
Yeah.
What's coming up?
It?
Yeah, absolutely.
The 2/22/22
on a Tuesday.
Ultimate call to action for all things STP. We're going to be meeting at Cedar Glade, a little meet and greet and networking and a little quick presentation about all we got going over here. So mark your calendars, 2 weeks from today.
2 weeks from today, 2/22/22 on a Tuesday.
That may be the best tease I've ever heard ever. Like, that was fantastic.
Yeah, it's just too much.
Or at least the second best I've ever heard.
Right. Well, we're pumped. Big thanks to you, Jonathan, and Cedar Glade for letting us set up. But it's going to be fun, pretty laid back, pretty low key, but just getting a lot of folks under the same roof that are familiar, but maybe not knowing all the things we got going, and just trying to raise some awareness, hopefully raise some funds, and keep everything moving. So
that's right.
For that.
That's right. Love it. All right. You guys have a great rest of the week. Brad, thank you again so much
thank you
for
Brad.
coming in.
I'm happy to be here.
And
thanks for having me.
Y'all have a good week.
All right.
See ya.